Hello and welcome to another Green Thumb program. My name is John Schaefer and I'm with the Harris County Public Library. We produce the Green Thumb Show in conjunction with the Harris County Master Gardeners, but our show is available for anyone who finds us. Everyone is welcome. And a great place to find us, should you ever want to look, is on the Harris County Public Library website, and you can find that at hcpl.net. And there you will also, we have a companion blog that is to this show that is written by HCPL's own Harris County Master Gardener, Steve Bearfield. And the links to the shows are in his blog. So you're definitely going to want to check that out. And it's kind of a different take or his experience with it. So we've really had some luck with compliments on those. So you're going to want to check out Steve's blog. All right, so we are here online the third Tuesday of every month at 11 a.m. Today's topic is fall vegetable gardening. You want to know how to prepare your backyard and discover which vegetables are best to grow for your fall garden. But before I introduce our presenter, a couple of things. Number one, we love questions. So please type them into the chat on Facebook or YouTube or wherever you're watching this. We have master gardeners that are monitoring the program in the chat live. And so they'll be answering your questions, but also I'm going to pause a couple of times during the program and I will ask those questions to our presenter. So you'll get a chance for a live answer from our presenter as well. So make sure you type those in. And second, our next show will be on Tuesday, August 19th, and really excited about this one. It's Plants of the Bible, the cultural significance and the spiritual meaning of plants in the Bible. So you're definitely going to want to check that out on August 19th, Tuesday, August 19th. Mark your calendars. But now I am very excited to introduce our presenter. Miss Teresa C. was in the Master Gardener class of 2005, so she's been doing it for a little while, although you'd never be able to tell. She has advanced training in 7 areas, including vegetable gardening. And so I'm very excited to say, hello, Teresa. How are you today?
Hi, John. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. It's hard to imagine that we're right in the middle of it's summertime, and I think the temperature is going to get up to like 95 degrees with probably a humidity of 195. And it's hard to imagine we're thinking about fall gardening, but I guess that's just the way it goes, huh? You got to think ahead.
Time keeps on ticking, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. So definitely just a reminder to everybody, get those questions coming in. And without further ado, why don't we go ahead and get started? Because I know you've got a lot of information to cover. So I'll let you get to it, Teresa.
Okay, thank you, John. I hope everybody's having a good day. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. So let's go ahead and go on to the next slide. We have a couple of websites that you can go to and get all kinds of, one thing I love about it, it's free horticulture information. And something else that I love about it, it's research-based horticulture information. So take a look at those websites and have fun floating around in there and enjoy the reading. So on the next slide, it shows all kinds of Green Thumb talks that we do, like what we're doing today. We do one topic a month, twice a month, once with the library, Harris County Library System, and once with HCC. So let's go to the next slide. We have a couple of more plant sales this year in October, one on the southeast side at Genoa Friendship Gardens and once at the Katy area HCC. So let's go to the next slide, please. This is a real important handout. When I go and do any kind of vegetable garden talks, I always have this handout with me for the attendees. Very helpful, lets you know when to plant the various vegetables. The way to read it is down the left side, going from top to bottom. We squeeze in as many vegetables as we can in alphabetical order. And across near the top, it goes January through December. If it's in dark, that's ideal planting. And if it's shaded, that's still a very good time to plant. Let's go to the next slide, please. So when you're getting started, now some of you may have already set up your garden bed. You might have been vegetable gardening for years. If you have not set up your vegetable bed yet, let's talk about what you want to think about. You want to pick an area that offers you at least 6 to 8 hours of good sunlight. Now, I'd say for fall vegetable gardening, I like to have 8 hours of sunlight. Spring vegetable gardening, I say between 6 and 8. You want to make sure that you have good drainage, that's external and internal drainage. Let's break that down. If you're doing a raised bed, like the rectangular bed on the right, then you're going to have drainage because there's an open bottom. But if you're doing container gardening, like the 3 half kegs on the left, then you want to make sure whatever container you're using has drainage, has drain holes in it. So you want to make sure there are either drain holes on the bottom or the side bottom. Now that's the external drainage. The internal drainage is the soil itself, the media itself, or the combination of soil media that you're using. So a good and easy recipe to say is 2 parts rose soil to 1 part compost. So for every 2 bags of rose soil you use 1 bag of compost. And I think that's a good recipe to start with. And then each season, and I consider that we have 2 basic seasons. We have fall and we have spring. So try to incorporate more compost each season. Now you want to make sure that you're not blocking out sunlight from large buildings that might be built in the near future. Maybe you have an empty lot and there might be a tall house that's built, especially on the south and the west side. That's where you're going to be getting your best sun. Also, what kind of trees, perhaps small trees that are on those angles, the south and the west side. Maybe someone, maybe even you planted an oak tree that's going to get very big, a magnolia tree that's going to have lots of leaves, even a pine tree. We don't think about the pine needles blocking out the sunlight, but any kind of tree that starts getting bigger is going to block out sunlight. You also want to make sure that you can get water out to your garden bed easily. Drip irrigation is always the best. Soaker hoses is still nice. Not everybody can set up a drip irrigation system. Maybe you can't talk a friend into helping you set it up. But soaker hoses are nice, even hose end sprinklers. So some kind of sprinkler at the end of your hose. Even hand watering, as long as it's not hard to get to your garden bed with that water. You know, if I have a little pocket garden that I'm going to be hand watering, I don't want to have to weave that hose around patio furniture or the doghouse or, you know, maybe a pool you have out there. You want to make it easy for yourself. So you also want to make sure that you have good air circulation in that garden area. We have microclimates in our yards. You can't see them, but they're there. So the way to find out where air circulation is to put out a couple of chairs every few places in your yard. You might notice when you sit in one area that the air is kind of still. There's no airflow on your skin surface. But when you sit in other areas in your yard, you feel the slightest airflow on your skin surface. That's where you want to set up your garden. You want to have some kind of airflow. It doesn't have to be breezy, just some kind of airflow. That will cut down on the possibility of insect infestation and plant diseases. So the last thing to consider is put your garden bed in a place where you see it. The more you see it, the more you'll be thinking about it and wanting to get out in that garden bed. The more you're in it, the better luck you're going to have. Even if it just means going out there and just poking your finger to that second knuckle into the soil, testing that you have the right amount of moisture in that soil. If you can't get that finger in the soil at all, it's probably too dry. And if it pokes in real easy like mud, then maybe you need to adjust your watering, or maybe you have a leak in the watering system. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. There's all different kinds of garden beds that you might choose to do your gardening in. Now, the top left one is just an old traditional garden, mounds of soil. You don't have to have garden walls to it, but you want to have it to where only as wide as what you can reach. So you want to be able to reach in and get to everything without leaning on that soil surface or stepping on that soil surface and doing your garden. You want to be able to just reach in. You don't want to compress or compact that soil. So only have it that wide, and then try to put pathways in between that allow you to maybe move a wheelbarrow in between the garden beds, if you're lucky enough to have more than one garden bed. And then as far as soil depth, I like to think about 8 to 10 inches of soil depth at least. I'm thinking in the fall, what's the biggest carrot I might want to grow? Is it going to be real big? And is that soil going to accommodate that carrot growing full size with its roots and all? And in the spring, think about all those tomato plants you want to have in your garden bed. Tomatoes are very heavy feeders, and they need a big root system to take in all that food from the soil. So at the top right, that's just a box garden. You can have walls of wood or stone or brick. I even like cinder block. Cinder block is pretty inexpensive, and it's never going to rot on you. So, and usually in your backyard, you're not too worried about the looks of it. And if the looks bother you, you can paint the outside of the cinder blocks. But most people don't worry about that. They just want something good and solid to hold their good soil for their vegetables. You can do postage stamp or pocket gardens, again, only as wide as what you can reach in, and allow yourself pathways in between. And on the next slide, you can be very flexible. So decades ago, people were talking about square foot gardening, and there is a lot that you can put in square foot gardening. So the only thing that I recommend is when you do this, it's a lot of fun. It's great to get the kids involved with this kind of garden, especially, but all kinds of gardening. Just keep in mind, think about the full size of your vegetable. So for example, a cauliflower or a cabbage plant, those get very big. They can get 3 to 4 feet at least. Some of them get a little bit bigger than that. So you wouldn't want to be blocking out the sun from smaller plants that you're planting nearby it. So just keep that in mind when you do square foot gardening and any kind of gardening. And on the next slide, you can be very creative with the kind of containers that you have. There's a lot of wonderful store-bought containers that you can get, like on the left picture. Those are wonderful. You can make them yourself, but there's a lot of the store-bought ones available. Some real good trellis work. Notice the holes in the trellis work. You would be able to reach your hand in there and do your weeding. And of course, the very important thing is to be able to harvest all those goodies you're growing in there. So they have nice big gaps there for you to reach in and fertilize. I didn't mention fertilizing. So the right picture is like a small arbor trellis, arched trellis. It's probably only about 3.5 feet. So you wouldn't be able to crawl in there in between. But you can have your tomatoes grow up. You can have cucumbers grow up. And on the next slide, it shows you bigger arches, if you can see the arch paneling. So cattle paneling, I absolutely love. It's very strong. It's usually sold in 16-foot lengths. The kind I've gotten is 4 foot wide. I don't know how many different widths they have, but they're nice and long, so you can arch it over from one bed to another, or from one end of the same bed to the other end of the same bed. If it goes from one bed to another, you can have things growing up both sides. Perhaps you've got cucumber growing up there, and you've got something like fun like loofah or something else, a kind of squash, maybe another kind of squash. And the fruit, I know we're growing vegetables, but they call it the fruit of the plant. As it trellises up, the fruit will start dangling down. So as you look through that arch, it's kind of fun to see, and it makes it easier to harvest. And on the right, it's pretty much the same way. They have it going from one end to another, giving you good ideas about different kinds of trellis work and arching trellis work. And on the next slide, another way to be creative is using any kind of object that might be large that you can't use anymore. Here they had an old boat that got a big hole in it, and they decided it was going to be just kind of crazy expensive to repair it. So they had a gardener that they could give it to, and they had fun painting it. Now this I would feel safe gardening vegetables in. These are ornamentals that they're showing, but I would feel safe growing vegetables in it because the wood should be safe. Now, keep in mind, if you're rescuing tires from the side of the road or other things that you might found objects that you might want to create a garden bed, think of what chemicals they might be putting into your garden bed. So I would not use tires for vegetable gardening, but they're a lot of fun for ornamental gardening. On the next slide, you can have a portable garden. So perhaps you've had a plastic wheelbarrow that's split, got a split in the bottom. You got that drainage you need, or maybe you have a metal one that got forgotten behind the barn or behind the garage and had water sitting in it and got some rust holes in it. You've got drainage, so you can do all kinds of wonderful gardening, and you can kind of move it around if you misjudge the path of the sun. So on the next slide, there's all different kinds of fertilizers that you can use, and I'm not trying to advertise for these 3 fertilizers, even though I do use them, especially that bottom right one. And the top left. So what I'm trying to show you is that you want high nitrogen fertilizer for your, especially fall vegetable gardening. So the way to read this is any container of a fertilizer that you get, whether it's in liquid, powder, granule, whatever form you're buying it in, the packaging should have 3 numbers for you. And if you look across the top right under the word fertilizer, that tells you what those numbers stand for. So the first number is always going to be nitrogen, the second always going to be phosphorus, and the third is always going to be potassium. They always list it in that order. What we're looking for is a fertilizer that's high in nitrogen, and that's what these 3 containers offer. Now, you don't want to put it too strong. Perhaps you have a birth in the family and you're gone for a month to help the new mother and father, and you're gone for a while, and you come back and you think, oh, I haven't fertilized in a while. Well, I'll just fertilize double. You don't want to do that. So you never want to put too much fertilizer. Only put it as strong as what the container recommends, because you don't want to take a chance of burning not just the plant, but the roots of the plant. So usually we're fertilizing over where the roots would be, because that's where the roots are what's going to take in the fertilizer. Usually there's different ways to do things, but usually we're thinking about those roots taking in that fertilizer. And if you put too strong a fertilizer, you can damage those roots. So let's go to the next slide, please. Notice on the left-hand column, those 3 nutrients that we just talked about, that nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. So there are really 17, or some people say 20 important elements that we have in our soil. And we're not usually having to add more zinc or add more sulfur. Sometimes we do, but if you're constantly working your soil and adding compost, it's constantly breaking down and adding a bunch of elements, wonderful nutrients to your soil, some of which are these 17 elements. And different vegetable plants pull different amounts of the various elements. So keep that in mind as you're working your soil and adding your compost and fertilizing. So let's go to the next slide. So also you want to compost if you can. I realize not everybody can do everything. As we get older, we often downsize and we no longer have a place for a compost pile. But if at all possible, have a compost pile. And the next slide, there is often a confusion of the difference between compost and mulch. So compost is organic material on the left that has already broken down, and usually we're working this into the soil, whereas mulch on the right is hopefully organic material that has not yet broken down. So you might see little bits of tree bark and tree shreddings and things like that. And on the next slide, it shows you some of the many things that mulch helps us with. It helps to hold in moisture. So when you think of all those hot days we usually have in the summer, this has been an exceptional summer. At my house, we've had rain almost every single day, along with the thunder and of course lightning to go with it. But usually in the middle of summer, we're worried about holding in some moisture because of the heat. It helps with the structure of the soil, which allows for drainage. It can help cut down on weeds and insects. It can help regulate the temperature of the soil, which regulates the temperature of the roots in that soil. So when it's very hot, it regulates that temperature, excuse me, a little bit cooler. And in the winter, when it's very cold, it helps regulate that temperature up a little bit, makes the roots a little bit happier. It also helps, sometimes you get crusting on the soil surface, and if you have mulch there, it'll cut down or usually alleviate that problem. Mulch helps with erosion, and one of my favorite things is gradually it breaks down and becomes compost. And once it does that, you work that into the soil, and the next season after you plant your new crop, you can apply fresh mulch around the plants. On the next slide. So consider about when you're harvesting. There's all kinds of vegetables and there's all kinds of varieties of each vegetable. So think about when you should be harvesting the different varieties of that vegetable. Now, if you're growing from seed, hopefully the seed packet will tell you 50 days to harvest or 80 days to harvest. If you bought the plant, if you can just find out the variety, I know sometimes you go into even some of the good nurseries, it'll just tell you it's a cabbage. Some of the better nurseries usually have the variety, but sometimes the tag comes out, but you know it's a cabbage or you know it's something else. So if you know what variety it is, you can go home and look up, say, cabbage, and then, early golden acre, and it should tell you how many days to harvest. And that's important because if you're harvesting too early, sometimes the plant is still, the edible part is still just too hard to be palatable. It might be very bitter. It's not going to have nutrition for you. And on the other side, if you harvest too late, it might become hard. It might become mushy. And then, of course, that nutritional value will start declining. Now, a lot of your spring crops like the cucumbers and such, those seeds inside start getting hard. So keep that in mind. Are we going to stop at this one or the next one, Brian? Yeah. So with all of your fall vegetable gardening, you're going to be planting between September through February. That's seed and or transplants, and we'll talk about the difference there. So, okay, I think I think we can stop and take a couple of questions.
We do have a few questions. You teased me there. I jumped in on a little too soon. I was super eager with my questions. um, Great so far. We got a couple questions. Victoria asked, as far as soil for garden beds, would coconut coir and compost do well if you add more nutrients to the mix?
So yeah, I like coconut coir, especially with adding it to garden beds. It does really good with hanging baskets. Compost you do want no matter what. But yes, both of those will do good. That coir will help hold in some moisture. Some people pronounce it coir, some people pronounce it core. It's
As I said it, I knew I
COIR.
mispronounced it, but I thought, I'd try and fake it, but it never works when you fake it.
Oh, in my one talk, I'll pronounce it both ways, just to
Okay.
make sure everybody's disappointed with the way I pronounce it. But for all of you that are listening, it's COIR, and you can pronounce it however you want it. I do like it. So yeah, I would feel very comfortable mixing some of that. Now, don't get too carried away. It's like peat. People find out that peat will help hold in moisture, so they start putting a lot of it in their soil, and you don't want to put too much of it in there. But yes, I do like that, and I strongly encourage compost. Yes.
Which actually leads into the next question. So, like, if you're at one of the big box stores, you're going to see bags of topsoil. Now, where does that fall in the mix of mulch versus compost, or should it not fall in the mix at all?
Very good question. I remember when I was I wasn't even becoming a gardener yet. I just heard about topsoil. And back then you could get it for like $1 a bag. Topsoil is basically filler soil, in my opinion. It doesn't have any nutritional value. So if you, it's better than the clay soil, but if you need a filler at the bottom of something, I'm not against it, but I'm usually looking to just go ahead and put things that have nutritional value.
Right.
So that's why I usually say that recipe. Randy Lemon used to say 2 parts compost to 1 part, or excuse me, 2 parts rose soil to 1 part compost. And I think that's a better way to start, and keep away from that topsoil unless you absolutely have to use it.
0 part topsoil. I got you there. That's what I thought. But I want to make sure, because you're like, oh, it's on sale. It's so cheap. I can get all this.
It's
Okay.
a great filler.
Good stuff. And one other question. So, all of your great pictures that you have, and you're talking about container gardening, and you mentioned some of this, you have some whiskey barrels, and those look like actual whiskey barrels, not like the plastic, pots you can buy, but like actual whiskey barrels. And I know they char the inside of those, but thinking about, you're talking about planting in like trees or boats or all those different things, all those different things you can plant in. Is there a danger to the plants with the form, because whiskey and an alcohol, or depending what was in the barrels?
So another great question. Hopefully they've been aired out and that whiskey is not in a toxic mode. Hopefully it's diluted or dissipated well, and it should, because when you think, alcohol does evaporate.
Right.
So any harmful contents or chemicals that might be in it, you shouldn't have to worry about. They should be gone. Now, I did mention about tires. Tires will be releasing chemicals. So anything like that is made of something with a lot of chemicals that might keep giving off that chemical, I would not use for vegetable gardening. I love them for ornamental gardening, but not vegetable gardening.
Got it.
Yeah,
So all those
great.
whiskey barrels I have left over from the party I had last weekend, I can use those when I did.
You can start growing all your vegetables now.
I've got so many, so many.
I
All
bet,
right,
like me.
And then there was one other question that came in just to say, are railroad ties still soaked in creosote or other harmful chemicals? Because I know a lot of people make their rectangular gardens with railroad ties.
Yeah, so that is a great question. When you go over by Somerville, you can smell that creosote still. A long time ago, as you're saying, it was soaked in creosote. Now, keep in mind, what is available now may have been soaked in that creosote. That might be why it's available, is because it's so old. I from what I hear, they're no longer using that on new ones. But if you're getting them now, I'm repeating myself, it might be
Right.
because they're from a long time ago and they no longer can use them. So it might have some chemicals that you don't want. Just find out, if you know the source, then try to find out what's in it. Like if it's at a store, they should be honest with you.
But don't, if you just see an old rail yard, don't go picking them up. They're perfect. And
I wouldn't.
one last thing about landscape timbers. Of course, there's treated lumber that you can get at the big box store, and obviously, I know cedar and redwood are going to be your first choices, but they are a little more expensive as opposed to that treated pine. What are your thoughts on the treated pine?
Okay, so double check what they might have treated them with. They're not supposed to be using toxic chemicals nowadays. So hopefully, if you're going to your big box store, hopefully they're not. You should be able to do just a little bit of research. Of course, you can ask them at the store, but you can also do a little bit of research online about that particular store and what they put on their various treated lumber. As you're saying about the cedar, I love cedar. I love the smell. I realize by the time we're using it for garden beds, you can't smell it like that,
Right.
but it'll last a bit longer, and not as long as cinder blocks or other stones and such, but it still lasts a good while.
And
So
I
I
will
hope
say, if you live in the Harris County area, which I'm guessing everybody here does, occasionally there will be a wind event and it will knock down a lot of fences. And a lot of those fences are all cedar. And if you, have the ways and the means and a pickup truck, you can get yourself a lot of, free wood on the side of the road that you can then turn into some really cool little small planters. That's a different story. We got so much to cover.
um,
I want to keep. I know we'll have more questions. We will pause again for questions at the end, or at the end of the presentation. But why don't we let you get back into it, and I'll hold those until the end.
okay, thank you, John, and I love your comment about that free fence. I love that. So, okay, let's go on to the next slide and start talking about some fall vegetables. So these are a bunch of the crucifer vegetables, and we go to the next slide and start talking about cabbage. So cabbage, as much as we'd like to grow a cabbage this big, they actually do grow them this big in Alaska. I've had more than one source tell me, yes, we had very large cabbage heads like this. So when you're planting cabbage, keep in mind that it's going to be taking up a lot of space for a long period of time. So I'm usually putting my seeds in the ground or plants in the ground around October. I might put the seeds in the ground late September, but around that time. And some of them you can actually harvest in January and plant another crop. Some of the bigger varieties you might be harvesting anytime between January and April. So I mentioned here, or we mentioned here, that they're cold tolerant. Not only is cabbage cold tolerant, but it's one of several cold season vegetables that has a defensive mechanism to the cold, that it sends up sugars into its leaves as their defensive mechanism. And it's those sugars that you taste when you eat cabbage. It has a little bit of that sweet flavor to it. Now, things like also in the brassica family, like kale and collards, and some of them, they do have that defensive mechanism, but they don't hold it as much as the cabbage does. So you might read, for example, with the kale, do this, grow this, and this many days to harvest, and then it recommends you harvest right after a frost. And that's why, because those sugars are still in the leaves. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. So there's all different kinds of cabbage that you can grow in our area. Very easy crop. Cabbage it's such a versatile crop. You can use it in salads, you can have it in side dishes, you can mix all kinds of meats with it, and just all kinds of things with it. So that is actually my hand in the bottom left picture. That's to show you that's a little bit of a smaller head of cabbage. That's full grown. That's the early golden acre. Now I try to put days to harvest next to as many items as I can. So that early golden acre, notice it's about ready to be harvested a little after 2 months, whereas the other two, it's working on 3 months. So those are bigger heads of cabbage. Well, that's not only interesting, but when you think if there's only 1, 2, maybe 3 of you in the family, why not grow or buy a smaller head of cabbage? And that way you're using the whole thing rather than growing a bigger head of cabbage, using half of it, putting the other half in the refrigerator with all the other leftover vegetables. In this way, you'll have fresh cabbage. Now, I do recommend that you try growing different kinds. The top left one is, some people call it purple, some people call it red, but it just changes the color of things on the dinner table. And the bottom right, look at all that texture on this one. This variety is called Savoy, but there's other varieties that are textured like that you might enjoy. So it's kind of nice to change things at the dinner table. We have busy days. We sit at the dinner table half asleep or looking at your text. And, if you have something different at the dinner table, you kind of wake people up and bring them back to present time. So let's go to the next slide, please. So I like to keep in mind the different kinds of vitamins and nutrients that the different vegetables offer. The scientific name, by the way, is Brassica oleracea. So all of your vegetables are going to have fiber for you, so it helps with digestion. And all of them are going to have micronutrients in them. But I try to do a little bit of research on the various vegetables that I like and that I might want to grow. And the ones that have a notable amount of vegetables I jot down. So cabbage, for example, it has a notable amount of nutrients in all of these vitamins and minerals and nutrients. So on the next slide, there's also all kinds of Chinese cabbage that you can grow. Anyone that knows me knows I love Chinese food, so I'm always trying to incorporate plenty of Chinese vegetables in my garden. So this is Brassica rapa as opposed to the Brassica oleracea. When you go to the grocery store, they usually call it the Napa type with an N instead of an R, the Napa type cabbage. So on the next slide, if you slice back one, there you go. If you slice one of those heads in half, that bottom right one that was there, this is what it looks like. And to me, that just makes me, I want to order Chinese food. I want to get cooking in the kitchen. I just love it. Also very good for you. And on the next slide is the snow pea, which is probably my all-time favorite vegetable of any kind, spring or fall. Just love it. I try to plant more every year because I usually eat them before I get inside, so I rarely get to cook them. If you can trellis them, you'll be doing better. You don't want that fruit, and I realize that we're talking about vegetables, but they call it the fruit of the plant. You don't want that fruit or that pea pod on the ground. If you can trellis these up, you'll be doing better. So on the next slide, those snow peas, all kinds of wonderful nutrients and vitamins for you. Yum, yum. Let's go ahead and move to the next slide. So broccoli. Broccoli is such an interesting vegetable, especially in that when you harvest the head, leave the plant behind. And in a few weeks, at the bottom right shows you the side shoots. They call these side shoots. So you've harvested the original head, which was nice and big, and it'll start poking up these side shoots or growing these side shoots for you. And when they get to a size about equivalent to what you see here, you can cut them, leave the plant behind, and they might keep growing side shoots batch after batch for you. Now, I incorporated a picture of a flowering broccoli plant to show you what happens if you don't harvest in time. Again, maybe you were called out of town and that broccoli head turned to flower. So they're really just little tiny flower buds is what you're eating. And if you don't harvest it, it does flower and will turn to seed. Now, maybe you have an heirloom plant as opposed to a hybrid, and you want that heirloom broccoli plant to go to seed on one of your plants. Then you will want it to turn to flower and turn to seed, and that way you can collect those seeds. And the flowers are edible too. If you decide just to try the flowers and not let it go to seed, enjoy the flowers too. So the reason why I say to avoid letting hybrid plants go to seed is because a hybrid, as opposed to an heirloom, the hybrid means they've taken at least two varieties and hybridized them, and then they've sold you those seeds. So if you collect the seeds from the plants you planted, next season when you plant those seeds, I'm hoping I'm not getting too looped in here, those seeds, you cannot expect them to grow the same plant as the mother plant. And that's the difference between a hybrid and an heirloom. I think I went one loop too many, but I hope you understand that. So on the next slide shows a bigger picture of those side shoots. Yum, just love broccoli. Okay, and let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. All kinds of vitamins and nutrients for you, another Brassica oleracea. And the next slide, please. So with cauliflower, let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Now, cauliflower on the next slide shows it can get very big for a long period of time. The heads are usually a little bit more dense than like cabbage and other things, but especially cabbage. So it usually takes a little bit longer to days to harvest. So it might be in the 100 of days instead of 80 of days. Now, something you'll want to do, now this purple one, that really is a true picture. It's from my garden. I'm sorry, this one is not from my garden. So this is Violet Queen. But say you had a white cauliflower head that you're growing and you want to keep it white. So what you want to do is something they call blanching. And what you do is you take the innermost leaves of the plant and you gently pull them over and tie them off. So on the next slide, a wonderful photographer that he and his wife contribute to the Texas Gardener magazine. And I always like to credit photographers, especially when they're this good. So they've taken the innermost leaves next to the head of cauliflower and they've pinched it off. So here they're holding it with a clothespin. I like binder clips. I've seen people use the big paper clips, a little bit iffy on that, but they can work. So, and what you're doing is you're keeping it from the sun burning that white head. You're keeping it white. So you don't have to do it with the purple ones and the yellow ones. And on the next slide, you can see, so that's the Violet Queen that I grew in my garden. But got to show off, right? And all kinds of vitamins and nutrients. So on the next slide, the same photographer combined a bunch of different colors and textures of cauliflower heads. So when you grow the purple ones and you cook them, like steam them, they're going to lose that purple. They really end up looking chartreuse like the two in front. But if you want to show off to your friends that you grew all these in your garden, serve them raw with some dip and you can say, oh yeah, I grew all those colors in my garden. So on the next slide, we have collards, kale, and cauliflower. And let's go ahead and move to the next slide. So with all of them, you can transplant. Now with collards and kale, I think it's perfectly fine to direct seed, not so much with kohlrabi. So the difference between transplant and direct seed. it's the growing area. So if you're transplanting, either you grew it from seed inside or you bought it from the store and you bought the plant from the store and you're transplanting it to the growing area. Whereas direct seed, you're putting that seed directly where you're going to be growing that plant. So that's the difference. You'll hear people talk about transplant and direct seed, and that's what they're talking about. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So the collard, it's a very elegant looking plant. Any of the fall vegetables that grow in this mosaic form where it's kind of flower looking, all the petals of it. If you don't want, if you're cooking a meal that doesn't call for the whole head of collards, you can just harvest some from the outside of that plant and only harvest what you need for the meal you're preparing. And that way you allow it to keep providing for you through the season. It'll continue to grow the smaller tender leaves in the middle and keep harvesting from the outside, and it might last all season for you. Now, if you have a particular vegetable that grows in this form and you absolutely love it, say you love collards and you want it at least 3 times a week or maybe more, then if you have room in your garden, grow more plants and then harvest a little bit from each plant. And that way each plant is providing for you constantly. So on the next slide, please. Collards, so again, very pretty plants, aren't they? Lots of vitamins and nutrients for you. Another Brassica oleracea, the Acephala is the subgroup. And on the next slide, we'll talk about kale. Yum. Kale just got so popular. They were making smoothies out of them. They make kale chips instead of potato chips. They make kale chips, but they can be used for so much. So this plant, you can kind of see the tender new growth, that lighter color is growing. That's the tender new growth coming out. And the very right is another plant, those 2 little clusters, that's another plant, but all the rest of it is one plant growing in that mosaic form. So again, if you only need 1 or 2 leaves or 3, whatever you need, only harvest that and let that plant keep providing for you. It's a pretty plant, isn't it, with all that the little curlies and such. And the next slide, so that's winter boar. This is red boar. So red boar just adds another layer of goodness to your garden. So not only does it taste good, it's easy to grow. You can harvest just what you need from those outer leaves. But it's also pretty when the plant gets a little bit bigger and that cold hits it. When winter comes on and that cold hits it, it gets this deep purple look with those pink mid veins. And oh, it's just so pretty out there. Now, something to keep in mind, sometimes, again, you might have been called away for a while and some of the outer leaves have gotten a little bit tough. All you have to do is bring it inside, gently rinse it off, gently pat dry it, and run your knife on both sides of that mid vein. That's what's going to get tough first. So run your knife on both sides of that, and the rest of the leaf is going to be just fine for cooking or eating raw or however you want to have it. So the next slide is Hanover salad. That's actually the name of the kale. It's a little bit milder flavored, has a little bit of a different growth pattern, but still quite tasty, very easy to grow. And the next slide is Toscano, been grown in our area for a long time, absolutely delicious. And the next slide, gotta keep that nutrient information in there. So on the next slide, we have our kohlrabi. That's David Parrish's hands holding that. For any of you that have been around for a while, you might remember David Parrish, wonderful guy. Basically, that whole kohlrabi is edible. So there's that ball, and then you have those kind of firm stems that are coming from it. And the next slide shows some of the leaves that come from it. Now, the only thing that's not edible, excuse me. So if you look at the purple one at the bottom left, that which is coming out of the bottom is its root. It's like a tap root, kind of like a pine tree. it's got a taproot, and where it attaches to the vegetable, that would be the basal plate. All that's tough, and you're not going to want to eat that. So cut that off. Now with the ball, some people peel the ball and eat it, but the whole thing is edible. The stems, they're a little bit firm, but you can cut them up in manageable lengths, and it's great for dips. You can, have like 3 or 4 inch strips of it and have dips. And the leaves you can use for anything, a side dish of their own, add it to a stir fry, anything you want. Now, here I go about bad mouthing a plant. So notice it's very high in vitamin K. So if you're on blood thinners, this is actually going to work against it. Vitamin K helps with blood clotting. So some of us, as we get older, we have a problem with blood, and we need blood thinners. So this is one of the plants you're going to want to avoid. Hopefully, if you're on blood thinners, they've assigned a nutritionist to you, so you'll know what you're doing. So on the next slide, I think we're doing pretty good on time. Yeah. So turnips and mustard. Let's go ahead and scoot to the next slide, please. So turnips, be sure and eat the turnip greens. This is a purple top, white globe, and you can see why it's called that. So there's 4 particular root crops that I recommend kind of keeping them in mind together. So there's beets, carrots, radish, and turnips. And all of them, you're going to be eating the root. So all of them, I recommend you direct seed. As we talked about earlier, you're putting the seed directly into the growing area. All 4 of these you want to harvest slightly immature. So this purple top white globe, they recommend 52 days to harvest. I would start looking in the mid to late 40 days to harvest. The reason why is because they can become tough. They can get a little bit bitter, and also the skin can crack, and keeping in mind that they're underground. So if the skin cracks, then insects might want to go and chew on it. And then all of these, you can do all 4 of these, the beets, carrots, radish, and turnips. You can do succession planting or weekly row planting, where you plant, instead of throwing out a bunch of seeds and harvesting them all at the same time and using a few and filling up your refrigerator with the rest of them, you can just plant what you might want for a week or maybe for 2 weeks. So you plant a row, tag it and date it, wait 1 week or 2 weeks, scoot down for these maybe 5 or 6 inches, and plant another row, tag it and date it, and keep doing that until it's time to harvest that first row. And then harvest that first row, tussle the soil, maybe add a little fertilizer, and then replant that first row. So you're using up less space in your garden, and you're able to harvest every week or every other week instead of harvesting it all at the same time and putting most of it in the refrigerator. So it works out real good. You'll probably like it. And it's easier to weed when you have them in nice, tidy little rows too. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. So with mustard, it adds a wonderful little bite to your meal. A lot of people like it as a side dish of its own. If that bite is a little bit too much, you can put a little bit of citrus, lemon, and some butter. Yum, it's great. You can add it to salads. It adds a little kick to it. And on the next slide, thank you. I'm supposed to say next slide, please. There's all different kinds of varieties of mustard that you can grow, and it has all the wonderful things for you, wonderful nutrients for you. And the next slide, please. So there's radish and daikon. Let's talk about radish first. Now, the one at the top is cherry bell, and that is one that you'll typically see at the grocery store. It gets about the size of a ping pong ball, maybe a little bit smaller. It only takes about 21 or 22 days to harvest. So it is one of those 4 root crops with beets, carrots, radish, and turnips. And so you can do that weekly row planting or succession planting. And if you're harvesting, so you'll be harvesting that first row very quickly, so you're not taking up much space in the garden, and they're small, so you can plant them maybe 3 inches apart instead of 5 or 6 inches apart. So it takes up less space that way as well. On the next slide. So that's cherry bell, and notice the one on the bottom, add a different color to the dinner table. Now that one's a little bit bigger than the one at the top. So it's going to take a little bit longer till days to harvest. So it's about 2 months instead of under 1 month. So on the next slide, showing these nutrients, something I found really interesting when I was doing my nutritional information research. Radish is high in antioxidants. And, there's not that many vegetables that they might have antioxidants in them, but it's not a notable amount. So there are other vegetables like artichoke that's high in antioxidants and other ones too, but I just don't come across that many. So on the next slide, this is a daikon. So it's basically an Asian radish, absolutely delicious, has about the same flavor. Most of the daikon that I've seen and grown grow quite a bit bigger than that little cherry bell radish. So it's Raphanus sativus, but the subvariety is Longipinatus. And I go into my local H Mart, which has a lot of the Asian and international vegetables, and they have some real big daikon. Now, when you use this, you want to cut off the top, and you can use that. Put it in stews, stir fries, whatever you want. The root part, which grows underground, I usually peel it and then I'll cut it up maybe in cubes, little cubes, and I cook it with a little bit of water. And then you can use it for sweet or savory. If you do sweet, you can put some brown sugar or honey or something like that. I think brown sugar and butter and a little olive oil is usually how I like the sweet. Savory, you can just add it to any of your dishes. It's delicious. So I hope you'll try that and enjoy that. And I think I have talked a little long. So
No, it's a perfect amount of talking.
Okay.
Questions? Yes, we definitely have some questions. So let's get into those. You answered one of the. We had a question about succession gardening, and I think you did a great job on at explaining that. And another benefit I think is it really kind of keeps you involved in the day. You're continually going back to your garden, because sometimes life does get busy, and you spend that great weekend planning all this stuff. You're like, all right, we'll see you. And then the problem is you go out there to harvest it, and if you're lucky, you get a big crop. Then you're like, wait, now I've got so many radishes. I can never eat this many radishes. And you're like, it's great to share with your friends, but
they start running the other way because they see the armful of radish.
Exactly. Like, no, we're good on radishes. We're fine for the next year. So the succession gardening is a way of just kind of keeping it going over time. So I think that's it keeps you involved, but also then you're eating what you need. It's a very more sustainable, obviously. Okay, questions. Here's one of them. This came in. It said, which plants are the most tender during cold weather and absolutely need to be covered? Are there plants that you can leave uncovered?
So I would not mind my panelists chiming in as well. Most of the cabbage is good and hardy. Lettuce is hardy. I guess if it's going to be real cold, I might put a block next to lettuce. But oh gosh, I'm trying to think. I guess lettuce might be the most tender one that I can think of. Yeah, because most of these vegetables, they're fall crops. And so that's why we're encouraged to grow them in the fall.
Okay.
So
right.
Yeah, we have had 2 very hard freezes in the last several years, and most of my vegetables have survived. So
well, that's good.
I hope that any of the panelists that want to contribute some thoughts as to tender plants.
I'll wait for them as they're thinking about that. I will go ahead. We have spinach. It was one of our master gardeners that said spinach. We did have another question. So we talk about soil testing and stuff like that. And I know, look, in all honesty, I've tried to plant some vegetables before, and they haven't done so well for whatever reason. Probably user error, I'm sure. But after, is there a resource that you're aware of, like if you have your soil tested and you know what your three numbers are going to be and where you're kind of at, that there's some vegetables that maybe more you've got a better chance with, like if you're soil tested and they're like, okay, well, this soil is going to be really good for beets or whatever, or something, tubers or anything. Is that, do you know if
Yeah.
that is a resource that's out there?
Well, that's a very good question. When you get your soil tested, there are some blanks that you can fill in and let them know. If you go to the A&M lab, they have
Right.
an A&M lab that does the
Exactly.
testing. You can let them know, like think ahead of time and think of what you want to grow
Mm,
and say, I want to grow some beets. I want to grow some cabbage. If you know what possible vegetables you might want to grow and say, I want to grow all of these, will this soil that I have do good with it? If not, are you going to can you recommend? So
okay.
they'll help you out with that.
Wow, there you go. So that's, if you already know what vegetables you like and you'd like to grow, that's the way to go. No, I like that. That's definitely that answers the question. Perfect. We also talked about hybrid seeds, or you talked about hybrid seeds. And obviously, I'm guessing this is but I just want to make sure on the package, it's going to say it's a hybrid seed. So not to like think it's going to last you the next year, like it's, or for two or multiple growings. That's
It should say hybrid on the package. Yes.
And if
Yes.
the second part of that is if at the grocery store, sometimes you have people like they'll get the stalk of celery and they'll grow more celery or whatever, and it's a great thing, especially for the kids. Would those most of the vegetables you're getting from the produce section, would those be hybrid plants that you probably to think about, or do you know?
Not necessarily. So you can't really tell when we talk about garlic,
Okay,
garlic, for example, there's hardneck and soft neck. And what grows here is the soft neck. And
okay,
what you get at the grocery store, you just can't tell what it is. So you're not going to have the best luck with growing cloves of garlic from the garlic you buy at the grocery store, but it'll grow. So you
right,
can still eat the greens. You might have a smaller head, the head should get this big around where, the wrong kind only gets this big around, but you can still eat the leaves. As far as celery and other things, they're not telling us what variety it is. So if we try to propagate from that, we don't know what kind of luck we're going to have. Green onions, for example, I like to buy some green onions from the grocery store as we're coming on fall. And I pick ones specifically that have roots on them
yeah.
so that I can cut off the top and put those roots in the ground and yeah, let it keep growing. So you can be very creative with the vegetables you get at the grocery store.
It's a lot of fun, and I still, when I used to live in California, I had a pineapple that I grew, a pineapple out of the, and that was like the best. And I haven't had any luck with the pineapples here, but
Yeah, people try to grow avocado from a good avocado that they go from the grocery store, but probably the seed that you grow that avocado from grows in California or another part of the country or
yeah,
Mexico, things like
most
that.
likely.
So, yeah.
Good to know. Good to know. So many great questions. So many great things that you've said, Teresa. Thank you so much. Any closing thoughts or anything? I know. Did we have? I think I might find a link here real quick. I think we had maybe a sale. What was the date of the sale coming up? Did we?
October, there's two in October. I can't remember the exact, I think one is on the 5th and I can't remember the other one. So one is on the southeast side and one is at the KDHCC
I am
location.
putting the link. Hold on, like, let me copy this real quick. I want to put the link into the comment section right now so people have that information. And there you go. Teresa, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for doing this, and we look forward to hearing from you again. I know you presented last year, so we'll hopefully we can. Hopefully, it won't be so long before you come back and see us.
I hope.
All
Thank
right.
you so much, John, and thank you, panelists, everybody.
Yes, obviously. Thank Yvonne, Jessica, Joanne, and Chev. And Steve. I always forget to thank the people I should thank. So thank you for mentioning that, and we'll see you guys later on.